Welcome to another episode of Overcome Outloud with Charlie Smith. This is a podcast that is committed to speaking with real people that have overcome real obstacles in their lives to give others hope. This is our second episode of Overcome Lessons. The first one was so successful and I think so meaningful for people. We wanted to jump back in and finish talking about some important lessons that we learned about overcoming. And I'm back with Chaz Neneker, who launched the podcast with me last year. We've got 27, now 28 full episodes out, and we've learned a lot of lessons. And I think, the last segment of this podcast, part one, where we went through the lessons that we've learned so far, it needed a part two.
Yeah, definitely did. So to start us off here, I think I want to talk a little bit about, let's pick up where we left off, which is the lessons that are these sort of reoccurring themes that we get from the guests. And one of those being, once that they have made a change, how they stay in that change. What have you seen? I've seen that there's been some patterns.
Yeah, I think every single overcome story that we've had has got patterns of, really gets back to, as we are, or at least I'm a student of Trevor Moawad and the concept of neutral thinking that he outlined in his book, It Takes What It Takes. All of us that have overcome stories got where we were because of certain behaviors. We had certain beliefs that drove certain behaviors, and we engaged in those behaviors, and the days got very dark. And what's so encouraging about all of our guests is when they made a decision and committed to a new set of behaviors, it's like those behaviors became not just the new norm, but became expansive, and they grew. When you look at Erica Sandor-Zur, I think, is a great example. I think Erica Sandor-Zur, who's now a professional tennis player, was in at least 19 rehabs, and she is so clear to tell us that when you Google her name, instead of mugshots, you see her pro tennis ranking.
Right.
And what you've seen from her is, since she made her decision to change and to get sober and to change the way she feels about herself, that, there's this concept called expansion theory, which is what we focus on expands, and it works both ways, right? When we focus on those things in our lives that are bad, we see everything through a lens of scarcity, and everything through a lens of not enough, whether it's we're not enough or what we have isn't enough. But just the opposite, when we turn that lens and turn those glasses around and we see things through what we are and what we can be, and we remain consistent, it's actually, those behaviors become even more embedded. I think people will say that, you make habits and then habits make you. And that's, what I've seen with her and with Trisha Kendall, another great example of somebody who was, really at death's door, ready to take a lethal overdose of drugs when her sister called. And now she today is, she talks about making a two-way agreement, all the choices that she's made. She's really, really clear in her message about these empowering choices that she made, and how keeping on track with keeping those agreements, and maintaining those agreements consistently has led her to become, a leadership expert, a national public speaker, I think a subject matter expert when it comes to leadership and empowering, women, especially in their roles and in finding their own success. And this is somebody who, literally was ready to take her own life through a lethal overdose. And so, what you see is, from that dark place, the things that people are capable of in continuing to make good, healthy choices. Prince Daniel Jr. comes to mind. That was an episode that we just launched a few weeks ago. I actually had the pleasure of going down and seeing Prince Daniel Jr. In San Diego, and actually got to meet his mom, who was visiting from Houston at the same time. And Prince, again, like Trisha, was so lost and so empty, he was ready to take his own life. After a 3.5-year career in the NFL that ended as a result of injury and some other circumstances, and now he's created this. He's gone from that dark place. He got behind a bunch of healthy behaviors, including meditation, including mindfulness practice, and now has figured out where his kind of mess has become his miracle, where that dark place has become his bright light. And now he's launched Game Beyond the Game, and he's actually helping other professional athletes, men, women of all ages, reacclimate to a life after sports in his program Game Beyond the Game. So what I'm seeing is that, just as dark as things can get, they can get so bright if we keep consistent. I think it's a really valuable lesson that you point out.
Do you think it has to? These events that you've like laid out in the examples of a lot of the guests, they're extreme. A lot of them, right? They had to get to a certain point in order to flip a switch and start making consistently better choices. Do you think it has to get to that point?
No. Limitless Minds, Russell Wilson's firm, and his brother Harrison and Trevor Moad has started. They have a saying: you don't have to be sick to get better. What I think you need is a want. You need a catalyst for change. There has to be enough going on in your life that you decide you want to change. Pain is a great motivator. I mean, it is for all of us. I mean, it doesn't take long to walk on a hot pavement that's in the middle of the summer sun before you want to move over to the grass, median and get off the hot pavement. I mean, it's a great motivator, but so is wanting. Wanting something different in your life is a precursor to changing your behaviors. And so, unfortunately for most people, we have to reach that pain point in order to make a significant change. But I look at my own life today, having 13 years of sobriety, having made a living as a commercial real estate developer, and deciding to take on a new career in public speaking, in transformational coaching, in corporate training, in podcasting, in opening a sober living home for professionals and executives. I mean, this is, pain wasn't a precursor to those changes, but I decided I wanted to try and, expand and share a gift that I believe I've been given. And it comes with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, and a lot of anxiety, but I'm present for it. You know what I'm saying? I'm present for that experience. And although it can be challenging and create a lot of uncomfortable emotions, I think, George Mumford, who was one of our early guests and a close personal friend, has always taught me that it's just important to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and that a lot of the greatest things that we can achieve in life are on the other side of fear. So to answer your question, no, it doesn't have to get that bad. However, pain is a great motivator. And so, we're motivated by one of two things, right? Pleasure or pain. And I think both of them can lead to incredible changes. If we want something different in our lives and we start to get behind the behaviors that will create them, if an author just starts to write, if a songwriter just starts to, produce and sing, if an athlete just starts to practice, deliberately and has the right mindset, those things go hand in hand, then they can start to get closer to their dreams. It's just, we don't want to get destination disease and get attached to outcomes. We want to find, I think, and that's one of the things, just finishing up on this theme of consistency, is what I've learned is everybody has become capable of enjoying the process, right? Not attached to an outcome that's out of our control. When I get there, I'll be happy. Well, getting there has a lot of things attached to it that aren't in our control. And when we look at what we do control, really it's two things. It's our effort and our attitude. And we control both of those things, effort being, our behaviors. And so every day, every deliberate choice we make, if it's moving forward or closely aligned with the things that we want in life, then we get closer to the things we want in life. And that's, I think, one of the things that I've witnessed from all of our guests, especially, the JC Foundation, and the Castro family that came in. Truly, I think one of the most remarkable episodes in terms of watching the depth of their pain, having lost a loved one. We sat with a family who lost a brother and a son to an overdose, and all of the pain and hurt that caused, all of the things that were out of their control in that experience that they had to confront, and then looking what they did with that is what they control, which is how we're going to respond to this. And now they created a foundation and raised money and provide resources for other men and women to achieve sobriety. I mean, to me, it's one of the most selfless acts that's come out of deep pain, but remarkable how they just decided
what they did with it. Right?
Yeah, what they did with the pain. It's like, that old Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response is that moment of choice, where we get to choose how we're going to respond to an event. And they chose to respond with, respecting and holding the grief, and then having the hope that they could help somebody else. And I think it's important, to everybody listening, that you can, as evidenced by a lot of our guests, including them, that you can hold the hurt and the hope, and that you can be responsibly sad and go through the stages of grief and experience all of the things that go with them, and be hopeful that there's a purpose that you can serve in your life that will give you meaning, and it'll give you a bright light that you can use.
Right. Do something incredible with it too.
Yeah. Incredible.
Like you say these sorts of things a lot, talking about, optimism and it's not like that could have gone two ways, obviously. And for a lot of people, rightfully so, something horrifying happens in your life. A lot of people don't take that and turn it into something positive somehow.
Yeah, I think one of the
superhero move.
Yeah, it's. I think Ryan Hogan. If we go back and if you want to go back and listen to a great episode on that topic, I think people see, achieving something as this really big obstacle. This big long runway. This enormous effort, and it all starts with just one little decision and one little action, and that you just, I guess there's that old adage: how you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. How you run a mile is one step at a time. How you run a marathon is, one step at a time. I was listening to Brian Cain this morning talk about just the importance of mindset when it comes to breaking down these big goals that we have into just manageable pieces, and getting our mind around just these small steps. And Ryan did a good job of talking about whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is that you're dealing with, whatever in your life is not consistent with how you want it, that you have to look at why it's that way, and then what are the choices you can make right now to start improving that, whether it's changing. And I think the biggest thing, I'll just say for me, because a lot of the physical changes, I can understand behaviors. It's like, if you want to lose weight, then there's some things you can do around eliminating some unhealthy foods that you eat. You can watch your intake, you can increase your hydration, you can get more sleep,
right.
You can exercise, more. If you want to increase your flexibility, there's stretching and Pilates and yoga, and you can do those things every day and improve your stretching by incrementally a little bit. I think the harder things...
And it's measurable.
It's measurable, and I think there's easier roadmaps. I think the psychological and emotional changes are much harder, because there's no quick fix. When you talk about self-image management, when you talk about core beliefs, when you talk about really changing the way you feel about yourself, now you're talking about, it's not just about eliminating what you eat, or it's not just about, going for a walk for 15 minutes. Right. It's about really digging, inside of your blueprints, that have been laid down as a result of your experiences. I like to reframe PTSD as, it's your parents, it's traumatic events, it's social experiences, and it's trauma, and it's all laid down blueprints, and really getting to work on how you change those blueprints so you can see yourself differently, feel differently about yourself over time, so that you ultimately behave differently. I think that's, to be honest with you, those are the things that I've really appreciated more from our guests, especially, Chaz, those guests who on the outside appear to, when you look at Chris Ross, people that appear to have, externally, these incredible lives, or Tony Mandarich, who looked like externally, cover of Sports Illustrated, highly coveted draft pick. They seem to have everything, but inside they don't feel enough. And so ultimately, in Maxwell Maltz's book, Psycho-Cybernetics, which I highly recommend for anybody working on self-image management. Read, he talks about you will act as the person you conceive yourself to be. In fact, you can't act differently, and you might be able to for a little while. You might be able to outperform your self-image for a little while, but very quickly, you'll revert back to almost like homeostasis. You'll revert back to this image that you have. It's like, I guess the best way I could describe it is like a thermostat, right? Mm-hmm. If it's set at 55, once it gets to 55, it shuts off. The momentum of the cooling, might get it to 56, or 54, but ultimately, once that thermometer gets hot enough, depending on where you set it, it will shut off and stop heating. And that is like our self-image. It's a bit of a thermostat for our performance.
Well, this goes back to the consistency thing too, but also the fact that you're trying to tackle. You called it blueprints. I like that because it's like there's architecture that has been built into you leading up to whatever point in your life that has been put there by parents, socially, inner talk, and a lot of that stuff feels permanently hardwired, right?
Yeah, it does. And it's not. Science
Right.
has shown that neuroplasticity exists, that we can reframe and reprogram.
Well, you're living proof of that.
I am. And I think if you're listening to this and you've got some negative core beliefs, I go back to George Mumford's episode, but more importantly, my relationship with him, where he made it very clear to me that my limiting beliefs that were laid down, the blueprints, or the architecture of my self-image that was laid down through my upbringing, needed to be disbanded in order for me to start to feel better about myself. That our limiting beliefs kind of serve as gatekeepers to our healthy core beliefs coming in, to absorbing good things about ourselves. And how do you eliminate limiting beliefs is to really start to put them to the test. And that was the first thing that I had to do, is really, kind of tear up the old blueprints and realize that they built an old, unstable house that I didn't want to live in anymore. Make sense?
Right, it does. But here's the thing: you said, I knew I had to do that. I knew I made that decision. You did make that decision, but another theme I think with you saying that has been brought up and a lot with the guests is that, you talking about George, you reached out for help in that process. When you realized that there's something that needed to be addressed, you were okay with going, I need help with this. You start the journey, the idea of the journey by yourself, but you asked for help.
Yeah,
right?
I think, yes. What a great point. And I think that's, a really great overcome lesson. I think, when I had an opportunity to speak with several, kind of really powerful leaders recently. Tim Brown, who was one of the early responders to 9/11, and Jason Redman, retired Navy SEAL who faced an ambush in Iraq, about leadership. And one of the things we have to do is lead ourselves. And one of the attributes of leadership, both of them pointed out, was humility. And I think that goes along with that need to ask for help. That I don't know everything. That when it comes to self-improvement, physical improvement, emotional improvement, that there are people out there that know more than I do, that can see me better than I can see myself, and can help me lay down a new set of blueprints. But you have to add, I can tell you from experience, I gain a lot of satisfaction being able to help people. Even just producing and releasing this podcast, gives us our own little slice of doing our part. And I think when you ask for help, you're allowing somebody else, you're giving somebody a gift. And I think everybody, I don't think I could, whether it's RJ or Mike Conroy or Trisha Kendall or Lacey Calhoun, Lacey Calhoun, who was a young single mother, really feeling trapped and isolated in her alcoholism, and watching her talk about the importance of trusting other women, how hard that was for her, but she knew that she couldn't do this alone. It was just too much for her. And once she asked for help, the amount of help that came was, remarkable. When you hear her talk about the amount and number of people that showed up to walk her out of the cave she was in. And it does take courage to ask for help. But yeah, sure, I asked George Mumford for help. In fact, I'll tell you that, our self-worth sometimes, dialed so far down, we don't feel worthy. At least I can speak for myself, and I think I speak for most of the other guests that were in those dark places. Because of the way you've been behaving, and because of the guilt and shame associated with past events, you don't feel worthy of the help. And George is always quick to point out, that it's my job to ask. That is my job, is to ask for help. And when you ask the right people for help, I think my conversation with George on limiting beliefs was 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I was having a brief conversation with him about, kind of reframing this identity, and him explaining to me in very simple terms how removing those limiting beliefs was the first stage, and then directing me to some things that I could do and some places I could go to learn more about that. But yeah, asking for help. I don't know many people that have overcome anything in their lives that haven't asked for help from somebody.
Right. I think that is a hard one for a lot of people, though, because like you said, there's two things that can get in the way. One you already mentioned, which is feeling not worthy to receive the help. I also feel like there's a bit of a mindset around maybe it's like a false toughness, false maybe resilience, that you can figure it out on your own, and you will eventually. Even though you keep digging, things keep getting worse, but you're going to do it. Like one day you'll finally flip a switch and like you're going to do this by yourself. I think that's a dangerous. I've been in that sort of thought process before as well, and then the third one being that you're maybe past help. So I think all those things can be pitfalls to asking help. It's an embarrassing thing too. I think there could be some ego that blocks it a little bit. So, and some people don't know where to start, don't know who to reach out to, or how that even looks, or where to begin to ask.
Yeah, those are important. Let's talk about that, because that whole ego thing is important, and I think our ego is meant to protect us, and sometimes it just flat out lies to us. I mean, and that's the problem. And so we can kind of break the myth and that is an old, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I mean, that kind of mentality existed for some time, but it is that kind of in the movie Rocky Balboa says, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up and keep moving forward, and but sometimes it's hard to get up, and I think we'll do a service to everybody listening by letting you know that when I look at Tony Mandarich, we're talking about a larger than life human being, literally, an offensive lineman, highly touted draft pick, highly touted, highly recruited college football player. I mean, when you sit down and you look, and I still, actually was just messaging with Tony yesterday as a result of the connection we made over the last few years. He is one of the kindest, gentlest, most authentic human beings that you'll ever want to meet. And we often view people's appearance as a roadblock to asking for help, and it does them a disservice, and it does us a disservice. I'm often apt to pick up the bill at dinner, and what I've realized recently is, and as good as that feels to treat somebody, I'm taking away from somebody else the opportunity to get that good feeling, and that's what asking for help, or not asking for help, I should say, is doing. It's really robbing somebody of the good feeling of knowing that they've done something good for somebody else. There is no greater, when you look at the recipe for happiness, there is no greater fulfillment than being selflessly involved in someone else's life. Having anybody who would come to somebody and say, hey, I need some help with this, even if I don't know, even if I don't know everything, I don't know what I don't know. And if somebody were to come to me and say, I really want to start motorcycle riding and being a great competitive dirt bike rider, can you help me? I'd be like, I don't think I can,
right.
But I know Sean Cantrell, or, I know the Cantrell family, and I know some people that have competitively dirt bike rode, and I know some guys that are out on the mountain bike trails, and, let me talk to them and find out, what their path was like and get you in touch with them. That's an opportunity to be of service, and so I think we have this false impression that if we don't know everything, we can't be of help to people. And just actively listening, I think that's another really important lesson I've learned. And actually, I think all of our guests, I think speak to the concept of just seeking to understand other people rather than to be understood. Just really trying to take a moment and understand what other people are going through as a pathway to asking for help, for yourself. And so I think you're giving people a gift if you're asking for help. And it's an important gift, and it's one that, it makes the journey easier. Might you overcome alone? You might. Might it take some time? It might. But will it be easier with someone else helping you? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
By a multiple. So, I often share when I talk about corporate culture and the importance of corporate culture about the association of teamwork. And, I tell this story or explain that, before there was machinery, there were pull horses and plow horses that used to pull stuff and plow fields. And they used to pull a plow, a horse would pull a plow on its harness. And one plow horse could pull about 8,000 pounds. And if you put a second plow horse next to that plow horse to pull, that in the first couple of weeks of working together, that they could pull 27,000 pounds together. So not 8 times 2, but almost 8 times 3. And by the third or fourth week, they could pull almost 32,000 pounds together. So, maybe somebody's trained for a 5K, or a 10K or run a marathon, and you have your training times. But when you get into that race environment, when you get into that area where there's other people around you supporting you, cheering you, and you're there in that moment, your times increase. There's energy in numbers, there's power in numbers. So yeah, I mean, to your point, sure, the old adage, you pull yourself up by your roots, you got this. Those things are all accurate, and a lot of people will believe them. I'm just here to tell you different, that you might be able to trudge the road alone, but there's other people that have walked on flat ground before you, and they can get you out faster and easier than if you do it alone. And you're actually you're giving somebody a gift. That's my own personal belief.
I like that. I also like what Paul says. When you can, be kind to yourself. A little bit of help from somebody else is a good way of doing that. And why not make it faster and easier? Yeah,
we have 3 rules around our self-talk. And, I think, as we get into to mindset training and performance, there's really, our body language, there's visualization, and there's self-talk that are the 3 kind of cornerstones of all performance, sports performance, mental conditioning. And when we get into to mindset and we get into self-talk, really have to ask ourselves 3 questions, around these broken soundtracks or broken records that we play, or negative self-talk. Is it true? Is it helpful? And is it kind? And really, even if it passed the first 2 tests, our negative self-talk, because it'll kind of sometimes sneak around and say, "Oh, this is helpful. It's really good that you think you're not good at something."
Yeah.
When you get to the "is it kind?" I recently read John Acuff's book, Soundtracks. Really great book, easy read. Actually, he's a fantastic writer. He's got a bit of fact and a bit of science and a bit of humor that makes it really fun to read. But he just talks about broken soundtracks, much like Maxwell Maltz talks about playing broken records. That we don't want to kick the record player. We don't want to turn up or down the speed of the record. We need to change the record. And I'll tell you from my own experience that most people don't take time to write new lyrics, or draw up new blueprints. They just assume the way they think, the way they feel is, kind of that old Popeye adage, I am what I am. And It's just not true. You are who you choose to be, and you are who you see yourself as. And both of those things can change.
So covering our lessons learned, and going back to Erica Sandor-Zur, she had something like 19 stints in a rehabilitation facility. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
When I look at that from an outside perspective, I go, how can you not have given up at that point? Right? There must have been a lot of the stories like this. There's like what's seemingly a continuous stream of what you would, from the outside looking in, say those are failures, those are getting knocked down, and still getting back up. I think it's super impressive, and it's also inspirational when you hear that somebody who had 19 stints in a a rehabilitation facility still found a way to turn everything around. And that goes to the resilience of a lot of the guests.
Yeah, I mean, resilience is an important topic. Martin Seligman is kind of the original OG of positive psychology. Is kind of studied resilience, and he really describes the narrative around resilience is really important. And he just talks about the 3 Ps, which is what's occurring in your life. The challenge that you face is not permanent, so this won't last. That it's not pervasive. It does not need to leak into every other aspect of your life. It's just this one part of your life, and it's not personal, which means it won't define you. This event will not define you. What will define you more is how you deal with it. And I think when you see Erica Sandor-Zur, I mean, Jimmy V and that famous talk, don't give up, don't ever give up. I mean, it just rings so true with me, because don't give up on your life. Don't ever give up on your life. I mean, and it goes all the way back to Trevor Moawad and neutral thinking, and that idea that the quarterback that throws 4 interceptions in 55 minutes of a 60-minute game, like Russell Wilson did in the 2014 NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers, 4 interceptions with only 5 minutes left in the game, is not unable to throw the game-winning touchdown in overtime. There's 2 conditions. You have to stay in the game. You have to stay in the game of life.
Yeah.
And you have to decide that what got you here needs to be changed. And it's just subtle and it's little. It's like, when I go back and look at that sequence of events, in anybody's life when they're knocked down, it's like just one empowering choice. Just one empowering choice, one simple empowering choice that's different than the choice you made yesterday that got you here. Whatever it is, I'm going to drink a little more water. I'm going to get up on time. I'm going to go to the gym on time. I'm going to say my prayers. I'm going to return my phone calls. I'm going to go for a 15-minute walk. I'm just going to do something different. I mean, Russell Wilson didn't lead that comeback I'm talking about. You can't throw 4 touchdown passes at one time, right?
Right.
You got to just complete a pass. And then you just have to complete another pass, and you need to move your feet a little different. You need to get through your progressions and your reads a little quicker. You need to realize that and I think that's, one of the things that happens, and I think our psychology does this, is we give too much privilege to the past. We think that the past is so entrenched in concrete that it's going to dictate the future, and it just doesn't. What we do dictates the future. How we behave is what generates the results that we get next. And it's up to us to choose whether we're going to do the same thing or something different. So what I see with all of these people is every single person that we've had on Overcome Out Loud, they have stayed in the game, and they have made a decision to make some empowering choices to change what they were doing, to do something different and better. Simple, but not easy.